Hello, everyone, and welcome back. In this session, we will be looking at an introduction to your application load balancers, and then also we'll look at an hands-on example of how we can work with your application load balancers. Now, application load balancer is one of the load balancer type that we have in AWS. So we have the application load balancer, we have the network load balancer, we have the gateway load balancer, and then we also have your classic load balancer, which is a very old load balancer that we have. So first we look at an introduction, and then we look at your hands-on example. Once again, before I start off with the session, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So your application load balancer, it functions at your application layer, which is the seventh layer of your OSI model, which is your open systems interconnection model. So your OSI, it has seven layers, and your application load balancer, it works at your application layer. And this application load balancer, it mainly supports your HTTP and your HTTPS traffics. All right. So if you want to implement HTTP and HTTPS traffics, that's where you'll be making use of these application load balancers. Now, under this application load balancers, you'll have a load balancer which will act as the single point of contact. Now, once this load balancer receives a request, you'll have a listener that you will be implementing. Now, these listeners will have rules. So, what this load balancers will do is it will evaluate these rules in the priority order. So here your listeners would be whether the request is HTTP traffic or HTTPS traffic. It will evaluate that, and then it will determine which rule to apply, and then it will forward your request to a target group. Now, what is your target group? Your target group is simply your collection of targets where the request needs to be routed. In this case, it will be your EC2 instances. All right. So what this listener will do is it will evaluate the rules, and then it will forward the traffic to your target groups, which will consist of your EC2 instances in this case. Now, you can configure the listener rules to route requests to different target groups on the content of the application traffic. So, for example, if the traffic is coming from HTTP, it should go to one target group. If the traffic is coming from HTTPS, it should go to another target group. We can define that in your listener rules. And you'll also be implementing a health check. So, your load balancers will only send the traffic to your healthy target groups. If the health check fails, then the load balancer will not send the traffic to those targets. So this is basically how the flow of your load balancer is. So the load balancer will receive the request, it will evaluate your listener rules, and then forward the traffic to the target group based on the rules that you have defined. So this is essentially how your load balancer works. Now you can add and remove your targets from your load balancer as your needs change without disrupting the overall flow of your request to the application. So to begin with, you can have only two EC2 instances, and if you feel like there's a change and you're expecting more traffic, you can add more EC2 instances to your load balancers. And again, after some time, if you feel that the load has reduced and you're not expecting any more traffic, you can go ahead and remove those instances from your target group. And all of this can be done without affecting the overall flow of your request, without affecting your application. And like I said, you can also configure your health checks. Now, these health checks are very important. These health checks tell the load balancer whether your EC2 instances can process a request or not. So these are mainly used to monitor the health of your registered targets. That way, your load balancer will only send the request to your healthy targets, and it will not send the request to your unhealthy instances. Now, with your load balancer, you only pay for what you use. So, whatever you're using, you're only going to pay for that. Like in this case, the EC2 instances and the request that your load balancer is going to process. So that's basically your introduction to your application load balancer. Now let's see an example for this. So here I have two EC2 instances, and I've hosted a very simple HTML page on them. So on one server I have this running. So this is running on server 2, and then on the other server I have this running. All right. Now we'll have these instances behind a load balancer. So first thing we have to do is we'll have to create our load balancers. So here you can see you can choose between your application load balancers, your network load balancers, gateway load balancers, and then you have the classic load balancer, which is your previous generation. So in our case, we are going with the application load balancer. So we will select that. You can give a name to this. So let me call this as demo. And then you have the scheme. Now, internet facing is you can access it over the internet. Internal, you won't be able to access it over the internet. It will be private. So in our case, we are going with the internet facing. IPv4 is the address we are going with. In which VPC you want, so we are going with the default VPC. And then your availability zone. So in which availability zones your instances are running, you have to make sure that you select that availability zone. Now, when you're creating this load balancer, so here you can see it is running in US East 1B. So you have to make sure that you're selecting that, and you need to select a minimum of 2 availability zones. So even if your instances are not running, you will have to select 2 availability zones, and it is recommended that you spread your instances. Like, if you have 2 instances, one instance in US East 1A and the other instance is in US East 1B. That's how the recommendation is. Now, once you're done with this, you can select your security group. So I'm going with this where I'm allowing all traffic, but generally it is recommended that you maintain a separate security group for your load balancer as well. And this is your listener. All right, so the rules that you want to define, this is where you're going to define. So whether you want to process your HTTP traffic or you want to process your HTTPS traffic. Now, HTTPS, you'll need to have a certificate. In our case, we don't have a certificate, so we are going with HTTP, and default is port 80. We will leave it to that. And you'll need to define the target group. So for the HTTP traffic, to which target group the traffic should be routed. So we don't have a target group, so we'll create a new one, and we'll start filling this. So these are the different types you can choose. So you can go with instances, IP addresses, Lambda functions, and other load balancer as well. So target groups can be any of these. So in our case, we're going with the instances. We'll give it a name, and HTTP is what we are using. This is all going to be the default values. And here's the health check. So again, health checks are very important. So in our case, we're telling the protocol to accept the traffic on HTTP, and we will tell to look for this page, which is your index.html file. So what I'm telling here, that my target group is that look for this file, try accessing this file. If you're able to access this, the instances are healthy. If you're not able to access this, the instances are unhealthy. So that's how we are defining the health check. And you can define the interval as well. So healthy threshold, let's say we'll set it to 2. That means only if I get success response twice, the instances will be marked as healthy. Unhealthy is 2, timeout is 5, and then we'll set this to 10 seconds. Now, intervals are very important over here. Why? So now let's say the first 10 minutes your instances are responding, and then something went wrong and the application is no longer working. How does your load balancer know that? Now that's where we have the interval. So whether your instances are healthy or not, every 10 seconds the health checks will be evaluated, and this is the response code we are looking for. You can customize this if you want, but 200 is your success code. And then next, here we add your instances. So these are 2 instances I have. Click on include as pending below, and here you should be able to see the instances, and then click on create target group. This will create the target group, and we are going to use that over here. So just click on refresh button, and you should be able to see the target group over here. If you want additional listeners, like HTTP yes, which points to a different target group, you can define that as well. In our case, we're only going with HTTP, and then we'll click on create load balancer, and this should create a load balancer for us. So this is still in the provisioning state, so we'll have to wait for this. It will take some time. In the meantime, you can have a look at your target groups to see the overall status of your instance. So you can see if I refresh this, you can see this, it shows initial. That means my health checks are being evaluated in the backend. So this will take some time, and gradually, after the interval, the threshold that you have defined, this will either change to healthy or unhealthy. right? So if it is healthy, it will clearly show you that the instances are healthy, and it will also show you which instances is having the issue, right? So this will take some time. We'll have to wait for this. Once this becomes healthy, we can make use of the load balancer URL. So here you can see there's a DNS that gets generated. So this will act as our single point of contact. So as a user, we will no longer hit the instances, we will hit the load balancer, and then the load balancer will evaluate our request, and then it will evaluate the rules, and then based on the rules that we have defined, it will route the traffic to the respective target group that we have selected, right? So let's go back and check this, and this is still in the initial phase. And now you can see the health status, it shows healthy. So this is basically telling me that the health check that I have defined, it is passed. So both the instances are healthy. Now we can take this DNS name, and if I hit this, you will see that my traffic will get distributed. So what is happening here is I'm hitting the load balancer. The load balancer is evaluating the listener rules, and then it is forwarding the traffic to my target group. So now the traffic is going to server 2. If I refresh this, you can see the traffic is going to server 1. So that's basically what your application load balancer is. So it is now balancing the load that we are getting. So imagine we have thousands of users, so some of the requests will go to server 1, and then some of the requests will go to server 2. So that's essentially where your load balancer comes in and helps you to balance the load on your application. Right, so this is how you can make use of your application load balancer, and this is by default is your HTTP. And if you want, you can put your HTTPS, but then again this will not work because we have not defined your HTTPS in the target group. We have defined HTTP only, so we'll have to remove that. And if I hit, sorry, I think, yeah, so you can see this is going to server 1. So this is what we have. So your load balancer. So this serves as a single point of contact for your client. So as a user, we'll be hitting the load balancer. We'll no longer hit the instances. Then we'll have your listener rules, which is used to check for your connection request. So in case of your application load balancer, whether the connection request is coming on HTTP or HTTPS on what port, all that checking will happen in your listener rules. And then you have the target groups. So the listener will route your request to one or more registered targets, such as your EC2 instances, using the protocol and port number that you've specified within the target group. All right. So that's basically how you can work with your application load balancer. So that's your introduction, and then followed by your hands-on example of working with your application load balancer. That's all for this session. Thank you. Once again, before you leave, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you like the video, leave a like and please share the video.